Hello, guys. Welcome to a very special Mouth of the Tyne live with, well, I was going to say Sean, but he's there. Hi, Sean. How's your Burnsy tonight?
What's that?
I say, who is it? Sean, Burnsy, your dog?
Well,
who have we got on?
Everybody says I'm Burnsy and you're Burnsy, so I said I might keep the name tag.
Oh, hey, great to see you, mate. Thanks for coming on. Always wanted to get you on sharpish as soon as we started doing these shows, so it's...
I've been honest, I find it very hard to try to make the time for it. Like, you understand, you have young kids yourself, like it's bedtime and
it is.
You read a bedtime story and there's 500 whys. Why this, why that, why this, why that? And you're answering all the questions because you don't want to rush it, so...
I understand. I'm in the same boat as you. It's just something we try to fit in at the end of the night, isn't it? It's hard. It's hard. So yeah, man. Well, thanks for joining us. Let's crack straight on. You're very well known on NUFC Twitter. Some of us love you. Some people not so much. I've always found you a very stand-up guy. Great fun, great laugh, and with the added bonus of giving us a few little secrets here and there. It's a tough business, man. You're never going to get everything spot on, but I think you've proven your track record. You've got a lot of stuff correct. Yes, we've got the odd thing wrong here and there, or things have changed. Circumstances have changed and the deals haven't gone through. But something I've always noticed with your information, Sean, is that it seems to come very early in the scouting kind of process. So you'll be given maybe some names, a whole host of names from maybe a scouting process. And as it whittles down, we may or may not get to one of these names that you've mentioned. And I think it's something that obviously that's very hard it's not up to you to decide who the club sign. So I think we've got to give you that sometimes. Like, you put these names out there, and not every time will the club choose to sign off a player. But there have been many names. There's been many names where you've mentioned it, and I've not seen it anywhere else. And then a few months later, we've either been linked with them, or we've managed to go on and sign them. So for that, I think you've got to be given your dues for, give you credit for that. So let's talk about this window. What did you get right? And were there things that you thought were going to happen that maybe didn't happen? Obviously, we've got Paqueta was a big one. You went in quite hard on that one.
I did. See, again, the Paqueta deal for me, so people say the club aren't interested, right? Because no journalist ever spoke about it and all this kind of bollocks. Nonsense. We were interested, but being interested, how to explain that? Look, this was backed up as well before I get into it. Transfer Checker, who is by a mile the best transfer source on the internet.
Yeah, right? Great.
He said it multiple times that we were speaking to representatives. So once he says it, I agree with it over any reporter or journalist, So for me, what I know about the Paqueta deal is I know the club, I know we inquired very early on, but we inquired about a lot of players in that position, Where did they see him? They seen him he could play in that kind of half position out the right, he could also play in a midfield three, and he could play up front across the front three as well. There was a lot of things about the deal that made me think that the club were going to pull through on it, but there were certain things about the deal, and I said this in a podcast at the very, very start of the window. I think it was when I was on with Steve Wright. Something that stood out for Eddie Howe was Paqueta had a falling out with the manager at Lyon last season because he wouldn't play as a false nine. He didn't want to play as a false nine. And if Eddie Howe was bringing him in, he wanted him to be flexible enough to play as a false nine. So a lot of work was done on the Paqueta deal in the sense of dealing with representatives. And I know this for a fact. The club went back maybe 3 times during the summer to find out what the price was. Was the price coming down? And every time they went back, the deal was structured a little bit better. Why didn't they go ahead with the deal in the end? You'd have to ask the club that, but the information that I've got after the fact, after I went all in on it, and the reasons why I went all in on it is because I knew they were interested in the player. The scouting network rated him as top class, that he was the one to come in. Eddie Howe and Dan Ashworth were never really sold on him, but there was a lot of the consortium you know, the Saudi side, Rubens and stuff like that were very, very interested in Paqueta. And also what they wanted is, they wanted a jersey at the World Cup, basically. They wanted a player at the World Cup that was going to stand out, that they could say, that's Newcastle's player, he's the player that you put in the billboards. You had Lucas Paqueta, who was going to probably do on the stand-up performance for Brazil in the World Cup, you know, so that made a lot of sense. Then after the fact, and I suppose kind of come to the end of the window, you know, what I did find out is that he wouldn't live in Newcastle. So they looked at houses, they looked at places, areas in Newcastle and stuff like that, but it was made quite clear that, and it was made quite clear to Newcastle that if he was going to join Newcastle, that he'd live in London, right?
Wow.
That's not alien though, like, you know, that's not totally outside the realms of possibilities with other players as well. So he'd live in London, right? So that was the thing. His wages will be, you know, so I think the original ask was that his wages would be about 160 grand. That came down a little bit in, and what he wanted add-ons for European football. So basically, if Newcastle missed out on Champions League or Europa League, he'd actually get a percentage added into his wages. So there was a lot of things like that, a lot of silly things, you know, involved in the deal that made the club not go from, like, you know, and they questioned his character and stuff like that, you know. So Eddie Howe already wasn't convinced because he didn't think he'd fit the Premier League. And other people as well involved didn't think he fit the Premier League, but the owners really wanted him, you know. But he was part of a big discussion, and when it came to it in the end, you know, they were really convinced that they were going to get Pulisic. You know, so is that why they pulled out of the Paqueta deal? Maybe so. Is it why they went cold on João Pedro? Maybe so. But the club looked out with Paqueta. I want my hands up, and I do apologise. I was absolutely convinced it was going to happen because, you know, for a lot of reasons, it seems like a great deal, and I'm a big fan of the player. I was a big fan of the player before Bruno Guimaraes ever signed. You probably dig out tweets about 2-3 years ago when I was talking about him. He will light up the Premier League this year, and we will regret not signing him. He will be fantastic at the World Cup, and we will regret not signing him. But in saying that too, like, you know, one part of his deal allegedly at West Ham is that if they don't get Champions League football, he gets a 15% pay rise. You know,
right?
So like West Ham didn't scout him, right? You could tell this by David Moyes' press conference. And plus the fact too, like you heard his agent there gave one of the representatives on the deal gave an interview last week, and they basically said that West Ham was something that just presented itself. Basically, I'd say there was about 14 clubs talking to his representatives at the time, but none of them would do the business at the price and at the players' demands. West Ham were after missing out on multiple targets, and the deal made a lot of sense to them, so they went for it. Fair play to them. You know, if it works out for them, it works out for them. But they had the money to spend, and they had the financial capabilities to give them the wages, so they went for it. They already had high earners on their books. The thing about West Ham is that their wage structure is a lot higher than us at the moment because we're only just kind of pushing through the ceiling at that. Like, you know, so with the Paqueta deal, it was, how would I say? I'd say it was probably 60% what I was getting told and 40% applying my own logic to it. That to me, that deal made a lot of sense to do, and I think
it did.
Not doing it because he'd be up. If he was our player now, he'd be our best player.
Yeah,
and this is a fact as well. There was players at the club that were convinced that we were going to get him too.
Yeah. No, I agree with a lot of that. It made perfect sense. I feel like it was something that we all thought was going to happen. The connection to Bruno is obviously a really big factor, and that's why it surprises me somewhat that maybe he didn't want to live in the northeast. But I mean, you just don't know the pull that London has, especially for people's partners. It's always trying to keep the wives happy too, isn't it?
There's a couple of players at the moment there that don't have their families living in Newcastle.
Yeah,
you know, but it's, and what I love about Eddie Howe, you know, so that I'm not sounding like I'm criticising with Paqueta, is that Eddie Howe wants players that are all in.
Yeah.
You know, and like he had a dig at a press conference, you know, and it kind of, people never pressed him on it. He said, we don't want anybody here with escape clauses. You know, so like I know that Paqueta definitely has one release clause in his contract.
Yeah.
But I think it's club related. I think there's like certain clubs or whatever like that, like, you know, it's something along the lines of that, you know. So he wanted escape clauses in his contract as well, which is something that it never got to the stage of actually nailing down a contract for him. But representatives speaking to the club, see, what people have to understand is you have the player, the agent, and you have a third party, which is representatives, right? You could have two third parties talking. So Newcastle could have a third party, and Paqueta or as Leon would have a third party. The both of them can discuss a full contract, and they can agree between them, and that's not counted as tapping up. Yeah. And then they relay the information back to the club. So that's how clubs get around it. When deals happen quickly and stuff like that, that's what was happening with Paqueta. Leon basically hired a third party to work the deal. His agent sat back, absolutely laughing. He was like a cat that got the cream. So when a club hires a third party, an agent is absolutely laughing. Their work is done by somebody else.
Yeah. I mean, I guess time will tell this season. I think he'll be a success. Maybe not until after the World Cup, when he gets his feet under the table and he settles down in the league. Just my opinion, I don't think he'll have as quick as an impact as Bruno did. I think Bruno's very special, but I love Paqueta. And again, I could be totally wrong. Paqueta might just come in and, start scoring loads and assisting before the World Cup. But
personally, I think West Ham are going to change that dynamic to play him.
Yeah.
So their setup is kind of changing slightly to accommodate Paqueta. So it might take a bit of time, but look.
Yeah, it could.
Again, I got it wrong. I want my hands up.
But these things happen, man.
It was some reaction to it, I would look at.
Football's a very fluid process, and we hear these whispers and certain rumors and things, and often but like I said, it's a long process, and by the time you get down to the nitty gritty of actually putting pen to paper, there's a whole host of things that could have changed, and we've seen it so many times. I mean, a good example would be Botman. I mean, you were always very full on that one, and that was one that you put it on the line.
You know what?
We did.
The thing about this is that the same person that was giving me the feeling that we were going to sign Paqueta was the same person that told me well in advance that we were going to sign Bruno Guimaraes, that we were going to sign Kieran Trippier, that we were going to sign Sven Botman, and reassured me every single week nearly, regardless of what was coming out with AC Milan, that Sven Botman was going to be a Newcastle player. At the start of the summer, he was like, Newcastle are very interested in João Pedro. Maybe not straight away. They'd prefer to give him another season in the Championship, but depending on, even in the Premier League, Watford stayed up. Depending on how the transfer window goes, and I have a tweet about it and I retweeted it, and they'll probably say that was Photoshop too. But and basically what it was is that João Pedro will be a late target in the window for Newcastle, and just like that last 2 weeks of the window, João Pedro pops up, and just while we're on the topic of João Pedro, and people say that I put out a tweet saying it's a done deal, fact, right? I can tell you now, I have absolute concrete evidence of that player celebrating his move to Newcastle, right? He was all in, absolutely convinced, and he got the nod that he was going to be a Newcastle player. And the evidence I have in this, and people will say, oh, why don't you share online and stuff like that? The person that gave it to me have millions of followers, not just 10 or 20 or 50, or is a person that claims to have inside info, but the information I have, and this is absolutely flawless. And if I put it out there, I could actually shut it down. But look, you either believe me or you don't, I'm not going to try and convince you.
Yeah.
So
I'd heard very similar on João Pedro, that there was going to be a medical, I think it was on the Thursday, and in the end, turned out that the medical was for Isak. Whether that originally was, I heard about the slot maybe about 4 days before being booked, and maybe that was for Isak, or maybe it was for Pedro, and it never got to that stage due to Watford, changing the goalposts and such like that.
I don't think it was 100% on Watford either, So they verbally agreed the deal, and then everything came in the next day. They offered better terms, and Watford pushed for a little bit more from Newcastle, which is part of the negotiation. If Newcastle wanted to close out the deal for the 30 million, they could have pushed it through in the end because everything never came up. The thing about it is that, and what I got is that the coaching team themselves, they didn't want to have to blood João Pedro and Isaiah at the same time, because you have Isaiah coming from a different league, plays across the front three. João Pedro coming from Watford, who plays across the front three. And if they could, they prefer to stagger it, and that's why they thought they were getting in Pulisic as well, which played part in that deal. So they didn't want to have João Pedro and Isaiah, two players that, unfortunately, for players that are versatile, sometimes their careers actually disappear because they're so versatile. So with Isaiah, they wanted to actually find out, okay, if he comes in and if Wilson is fit, where do we play him? Do we play him off the strike, or do we play him to the right? Do we play him to the left? Where do we play ASM? And if you have that problem with João Pedro and Isaiah, then it becomes a bit of a headache, So I think they wanted that 6 months or 13 games to the World Cup or even to the end of the season to find out, okay, this is where we see Isaac, and now we're going to bring Joe Pedro, and this is where we fit him. You know, so it was more kind of case of bringing in two very similar players that are going to have to be in the starting 11 and understand how to play them, rather than actually dropping off.
Yeah, man. Well, we'll take our first question here. We've got one from Islam saying, was there genuine interest in Harrison from Leeds? I'm not going to lie, I don't know too much about that one. I don't know if you heard anything about it.
I've been honest with you, and what I was getting is there was interest, but he was a stopgap. You know, they were looking at a player that was versatile, that could play, okay, can you play right wing, left wing, cross play left wing back, and play left back, you know, just to bridge that gap until they can go again hard and Diaby. Because they wanted somebody that could come in that right wing position and just kind of bridge them over, because they want to go heavy again on Diaby, because all the signs that they got during the summer was that Diaby was interested in signing, but not before the World Cup. You know, so Harrison was somebody that they could bring in. He's a utility player. He could play multiple positions. So if they could get the deal done for around 20-25 million, they would have done it. But it was a simple inquiry that led to a transfer saga. There was nothing. There was no bids lodged or any of that. It was simple. What are the price? This is our ballpark, and go from there. Leeds knew he didn't want to sign a contract at the time. He was kind of falling out with the manager, because the manager wanted him to play left back and he wanted to play as a winger. So it was kind of pushed by his agent to kind of get him back then on the wing. He's had a fantastic start of the season, and it was kind of pushed by representatives on the Newcastle side as well. So there was a lot of play there on that deal, but it was kind of mountain made over more than really.
Yeah, just to roll it back to João Pedro, do you think we might revisit that in January? Is that something, what if he's flying in the Championship, do you think Watford maybe wouldn't sell him? Or, you know, is that the perfect time to prove that this kid's in form? Let's get him in, you know? What's your thoughts on João?
He is very, very highly rated. You know, they see him as an absolute superstar. So will they go back in for him? Absolutely, but it's probably going to be a totally different market. You know, Arsenal are very interested in him. You know, a lot of big clubs are very interested in João Pedro. So I think the market that we're going to be shopping in January or the summer is going to be a lot more complicated than what we had at the end of the window. Look, again, I'm not going to tell Eddie Howe to do his job, you know, but I would have brought him in because I think we needed to jump the queue on him. You know, whether he has a good or bad season, Watford this year, there's still going to be a big market there for the player.
Yeah, man. Just a quick recap on the last window we had in January before the summer. I think it's only right to give you credit for the Trippier information. I remember you back in December, so coming up a year ago, you were honestly one of the first accounts that I'd seen mention Trippier to NUFC. And I know we've just touched on it briefly that the same guy give you the info on Trippier, Botman, and Paqueta, etc. But to me, there was clearly something there because you put it out there. I hadn't seen it anywhere. And about a month later or 6 weeks later, it was there. And this was in early December before the transfer window had even opened. So I think, you know, it's also, yes, people will, you know, will focus on the stuff that maybe hasn't come off. But I think it's only fair that we give you, you know, credit here and even there when it's due for these certain transfers that you have, you know, predicted correctly. So yeah, I think Trippier was definitely one on the list, wasn't he? You must have heard about him in early December.
He was actually one of the players on the project and for the club. You know, there was a couple of players there. Pulisic was actually one of them. You know, so they looked at players that kind of, you know, you can conquer a market with, like, you know, so Pulisic being one, Sven Botman being another, you know, Bruno Gomes. There's a couple of players, you know, and a few of them that they went for again. You know, with the Trippier information, that was the deal that was always going to happen. You know, I could have went way earlier with it, but again, I was just kind of making sure that I was right on it because that Man United kind of interest was still hanging on in the background. And being honest with you, if it came to a straight shootout, I didn't know who was going to win, and especially our opposition at that time. You know, we looked like relegation fodder. Like it didn't look like it was going to happen. You know, so again, I wait for concrete information. I've been honest with you. About a week after the takeover was completed, I could have said that I could have went all in on it, like, you know, like I do sometimes, you know, but look, I waited until I got 100%, you know, but still, you know, I said it was a done deal in December and I was getting slated up until the second week of January until he signed, you know, but look, that's all part of it, like, really.
Yeah, no, man, it was great info, man. Before we move on to your thoughts on who we could bring in January and maybe next summer, see if you've got any whispers that you'd like to share with us. Got another question from Islam. He says, Sean, do you feel downbeat at times when the haters getting your back on Twitter? How do you deal with the negativity chucked at you now? I've had my... This could have been directed at me either. So, Sean, I'll let you take it. But, how do you feel about that?
It doesn't bother me in the slightest. You know, why would it? Like,
yeah. These are
honestly, you know, it's again, you know, it's I kind of feel sorry for him, really. You know, if that's your conversation piece like that, you jump to negativity straight away rather than asking a question. You know, it's too often now you see it like it's you straight away you jump at your narrative rather than saying why do you think that happened? You know, like people never ask the question why. It's just they jump at their opinion and trying to force it down people's throats. But again, look, I honestly couldn't give a bollocks, to be honest.
No, great answer. I don't want to dwell on that too much because that's not what it's about tonight. But I just thought
don't give him the spotlight.
Here's another one from Richard. Any defensive midfielders linked for January? So we'll move on to January. Have you heard any whispers? Do you think we could go back in for Alvarez, who was obviously strongly linked with Chelsea as well towards the end of the window, or any other defensive midfielders? Because personally, I feel like we really need a defensive midfielder. I just like the idea of Bruno. I've said it many times on the podcast that I like the idea of Bruno playing further forward. Yes, he can play in that, deep lying role. But I just, from what I've seen when we had Shelvey in the deep lying role and Bruno, creating havoc going forward, I much prefer that setup of Bruno being off the leash. So, have you heard anything or, what's your thoughts or just on a personal opinion? Do you think we might see DNF?
The two players that they really like in the centre of the field role, and this is again going for their A-list targets, and they'll probably work back from that. It's Sucic and Kone as well for Borussia Mönchengladbach. Again, if these deals don't work out, they might revisit the likes of an Alvarez or something like that. But they were pushing hard for Alvarez come to the end of the window. He wasn't a top tier target, but again, a very good player. So. Again, they'll go back for Kone again, probably either in January or the summer, or the likes of a Sucic or someone like that can stand in the field role. But again, they don't have a definite target yet. But if they, in the morning, if they had the choice of any defensive midfielder, they choose Kone.
Yeah, I don't know much about Kone. I know he was linked periodically over the course of the window, especially towards the end of the window when we seem to be up in our game looking for a defensive midfielder. I found it slightly strange that we seem to leave that position until the end of the window, and we were definitely linked with a whole host of defensive midfielders. So to me, that shows that as the window progressed, probably after the Shelvey injury towards the end of pre-season, we probably were thinking, we're going to need an extra body in here. I'm sure we probably tried to sign Gallagher from Chelsea as well, although he's not particularly a defensive midfielder. He would have given us more legs in the middle, which, something Longstaff lacks.
They got burned by Chelsea, basically. They thought they were going to get a buy one loan, one deal off Chelsea, Pulisic and Gallagher, and Chelsea let them down the carpet path. Arsenal with Anthony Maitland-Niles basically said the player wanted to come to Newcastle, and they were like, "You're not joining Newcastle whatsoever." The Premier League clubs won't do business with us. It's simple as that.
It's becoming increasingly obvious, isn't it, that we're not getting any favours, whether it's high loan fees or dragging deals out till we get sick and walk away. Extremely high prices that are just ludicrous.
Douglas Luiz is another. We made a very solid offer for Douglas Luiz as well, kind of in the last 2 weeks of the window. And he might be one day they revisit in the summer as well. He's out of contract. But look, again, you'll have plenty of options. Even in January, the likes of a Grimaldo or someone like that might come available. You can play left back and you can play defensive midfield as well. So they might look for a stopgap there, and somebody with a bit of versatility. Which is something that the squad kind of, in general, kind of lacks a bit. Because if you watch us play at the moment, we're actually a fair better side with 3 centre backs starting. And if you look at the formation, we play with 3 centre backs, we play with 2 centre midfielders, and we play with 5 up top. That's the way that the formation ends up. It's kind of it's formations now that they put on Sky and stuff like that are just a visual representation, just for the sake of having something there. But it's very rarely that you see a team go as a 4-3-3 or a 4-4-2 and actually play in that formation, like, you know. So when we play with Byrne as a left back, he actually tucks in a little bit. Trippier joins midfield.
Yeah, very true.
You know, with three centre backs away to Wolves, we had about 580 passes. You know, we had ridiculous amount of touches, and then at home to Crystal Palace, we had only 360 passes playing with flat back four. You know, so we actually compressed the game far better when we have three centre backs. You know, and pushing the two in midfield, and then we had to split five up front. You know, we're way better. And if you look at possession wise, then as well, you know, it frees up Joelinton as well, because what Joelinton has been fantastic at this season is his stats might not be in comparison with last year, is that he is actually shutting down the right side of teams. You know, against Man City, against Liverpool, against other clubs. If you look at the heat map, you will see that Joelinton actually plays. He's almost playing as a false winger. He plays most of his time out in the left wing.
Yeah, he does.
He shuts teams down. And if you look at every team in the Premier League, that one of their best attacking outlets is their right back.
Yeah.
But Joelinton just kind of stays on that side of the pitch, and he absolutely blocks everything now.
Yeah.
You know, so it's almost like an alternative to a centre midfielder at the moment. Like.
Yeah, he's turning into a really special player. Is Big Joe. Defensively,
he's been our best player. He's been our best player on the radio.
He has.
You know, people talk about Bruno Ramirez and Trippier and all this kind of stuff. You know, like
it's a consistency.
Game in, game out, he gives 110%, and he has the talent to match as well. He needs to add a few goals to put. I think people talk about Ramirez suffering because of not having a holding midfielder. I think Joelinton is probably suffering a little bit more because the defensive work that he has to do for a kind of progressed midfielder is ridiculous.
Yeah, this is it, and it's why it's hard to label him. You know, I often refer to him as a hybrid midfielder. I just see him doing equally good in attack as he does in defence, and he just seems to have the legs since he's found this position as a a hybrid to backtrack, like you say. But it's when he wins the ball too, he's charging straight up the field with it. I just think he's phenomenal to watch. Although, as you say, it would be nice to have him again off the leash a bit and maybe not backtracking as much as he has been. So maybe a defensive midfielder might free him up that
catches us too when we play a flat back four, because Ramirez doesn't exactly want to drop in and split the two centre backs. Yeah. So that pins back your back forward in a little bit, like, you know, because Ramirez wants to be forward. You know, then you can't commit your two full backs really. So you're you look at, if you watch Target never really gets ahead of the ball. So when you're watching a football match, right, wing full backs, right, their position in relation to the football is very important. And if you watch at Newcastle, Trippier is always ahead of the ball and Target's always behind the ball. That's because we don't have that defensive midfielder that can split the two centre backs. You know, so that's something that's definitely needed. Look, we're a work in progress, definitely. You know, but still, and what I admire Eddie Howe for, it's almost like Gene Hackman there when he done the replacements there. Remember that movie years back? You know, he's still putting a lot of kind of, you know, squares and round holes, and he's really making it work. Like, you know, like he's done a phenomenal job. You know, we're not a whole lot of his disposal, you know. But like, look, we could talk about Eddie Howe all night about the job he's doing, but we're still about probably 5 players short of him being able to actually play a functional 11. When you say a functional 11, is having 3 players off the bench as well that can actually make a difference. Slow progress.
Yeah, it's been very noticeable this season. I thought it was very noticeable against Crystal Palace as well, when the 3 subs we brought on, we might brought more than 3 on, but we definitely brought on Byrne, when we changed the formation a bit, and then we brought on Wood and Murphy as well. And you know, I love Byrne. It's not really focused on that, but bringing Murphy and Wood on, as we've seen in other games, it seems as soon as that happens, it's like we've almost given up the game. To me, when that change occurs, I always put my head in my hands, because I think there's not enough quality there to change it.
See, what you're looking at there is, you know, sometimes, you know, and something I do know a lot is you have to separate when you're watching a football match and you're criticizing the team, not criticizing the critique or whichever like that, not in the negative sense. You know, when you're analysing, right, watch it as a fan, but analyse it as a neutral in that sense. When I watch Newcastle and I see Chris Wood, I think, okay, you have 6'4" target man playing with 2 inverted wingers that don't cross the ball. You have Trippier who has a fantastic right football with Newcastle. He kind of keeps the ball on the deck, and you have Target who doesn't really get up the pitch. So where are you getting the use of the target man then? So inverted wingers with a target man, you're not doing him any favours, you're not helping him. And the same with Callum Wilson. If you look at Wilson when he plays with ASM and when he plays with Amran, it's not really a great link up. If Wilson does something, he's feeding off scraps because the two of them are cutting in, and Wilson is looking to be behind the defender. So there's no like if you're playing inverted wingers, you have to play inverted wingers with a false nine, and that's what Alexander Isak is. He's a false nine. So you will see the likes of Almiron and ASM and stuff like that. Their goal tallies will go up, because the simple fact of now when they cut in, they're not looking at Wilson's back trying to turn the defender. They're actually looking at a striker that's standing up and actually looking to receive the ball and push into possession. So again, I won't criticize Chris Wood because I just think he done the job he done. It was really get somebody in there that's going to work a back four and run himself into the ground and be able to hold up the ball. That's what he does. His goal contribution, put him in a team with two wingers, and then I criticize him that are going to put the ball into the box. They don't.
Yeah, no, I agree. The service isn't there for Wood. And it is a shame, when he comes on and he's plodding around chasing, and because the speed isn't there either. It's not as if he's quick and can do the high press. It's a shame, but so he's on fire. Bit bold there from Richard, but Diaby in January. Do you think that's
possible? They'll go again.
Think they will?
Yeah, if they get the player or not, I really don't know, but look, they will definitely push again from him because they got encouraging signs in the summer, But this is a player that's on the radar of PSG and also on the radar of Real Madrid. If Campos takes the job at Chelsea, he might become on the books of Chelsea as well because Campos is a very big fan of his. So look, definitely they'll push. And one thing I can definitely say as well is that we won't have a repeat of this summer as well. They kind of when they digested the transfer window, look, I'd say allegedly or whatever like that. So I don't think PIF felt like they didn't do enough. I think they could have done a little bit more. And that's why the urgency was to go out and get Isaiah done. Don't mess about with the deal and go and put the money on the table and just get the deal done. But it's again, like you're talking. Eddie Howe had his head in the team, and it was an absolute dogfight. Then Dan Ashworth came in late, and then Darren Eales is coming in. Like with all that going on, they still had a very, very good window. You had a lot of strangers working together. These people don't know each other, and like Dan Ashworth's vetting process is different to Eddie Howe's vetting process, which is different to Steve Nixon's vetting process. So it's a lot to come together. So I think we have to give them a little bit of bedding down. They've had incredibly successful windows.
It's very early days in the project, isn't it? And we're so eager for this instant success. And we just have to remind ourselves that it is very early days. We're not even 1 year into the takeover. It's crazy.
There was no structure in the club. You had Dan Ashworth and Eddie Howe's nephew. They were up and down the country trying to get young players in. You had the young players there from Southampton, Arsenal, Chelsea. They were trying to get kids in the door there, but
they were travelling, weren't they? Yeah,
they were. Then Dan Ashford on the back of that then was getting involved in negotiations with Alexander Isaac and Paqueta and you name them. You could list off a million players, and then they have to do the vetting process because Eddie Howe has a certain vetting process of players, that they have to be the right character and stuff like that. I know of 8 deals definitely that. Yeah. They found out what the fee was, found out what the figures were. They liked the player, but he fell through on the vetting process. This all takes a lot of time. So now they have a full, in January the feeling is January that they'll probably go for 1 or 2. They're not going to rely on loans because they would done no favours on the continent either with loans. So they're going to look for 1 or 2. If they can get Madison, they'll go all in on Madison again. While we're on Madison. What happened with Madison is that they had the 2 bids. They knew that the 2 bids weren't enough, but again, it was testing the water, and it was the club knew there was no market for him at the time because Arsenal, the club that were interested in, showed no interest. Spurs were going big on Richarlison, and they weren't really showing any interest in him. So Newcastle knew that they were the only team at the table. They were told by his agent that the player wasn't going to sign a new deal, so they could afford to say, "There is, let the market be what the market is, and see what happens." And nobody else came forward, and then. I think they were running with 55 to 60 million, whatever that was, including add-ons for the third bid. And Leicester turned around and they said, no, we actually want the 80 million because the player's going to sign a new contract otherwise. And we said, okay, fair enough, we'll come back in January.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, I think we'll definitely revisit Maddison in January. I feel like something that I kept hearing time and time again was that Maddison's head was well and truly turned. It was a link to the player I had via a couple of via a few people, so it was kind of slight Chinese whispers, but did hear that the player was very looking forward to moving up here and was very much on board with the project.
The player was all in on the deal, and
I
had a tweet from last summer, and I said that one of the first signings of the takeover would be James Maddison. So when I talk about third parties, the third parties would have talked to James Maddison back in the summer even before the takeover happened. It would have happened again in January. It would have happened again, the summer just gone. So again, look, if Leicester are going to sell, we'll be at the table. Will we sign him or not? Nobody knows. But 100% if he's going for sale, we'll go for it.
Yeah, he's a good one for you. Essentially, this is asking you to reveal your sources. It's written in a way that doesn't sound like it's asking that, but basically that's what it's asking. Don't think you'll give us that type of info, but we have to ask these questions. How do you do it, Sean? How do you hear these whispers?
I'm incredibly good at guessing, and I'm fucking shit at Photoshop. So it's a mix between guessing. What is it now? So I guess them all, and if it comes true, I get lucky. And then the ones that don't come true, I Photoshop the M's, and then I send them out. So it's
win-win.
So I can't lose.
You never lose. The house never loses, son.
That one was funny though. It was. Sometimes I wonder with people because I snip the Isaiah stuff, and it's an app on the PC, it's a snipping tool.
Yeah.
Basically, you just take a window snip and you can send it on. But the print of snipping tool comes up on it as well, and that was put out, and sure, there was people went all in on it. There was a couple of big accounts and other podcasts that took a massive swing and a mix, and they apologized and blocked me afterwards. But look, that's all on them. If honestly, right, if people I'm fucking so busy, I do not have the time to Photoshop stuff, and I'm not on Twitter for gratitude or for a following or anything like that. I honestly couldn't give a bollocks. If I did, I'd reveal my sources and say this is where I get my information from. If I put up a screenshot of my Joe Pedro stuff in the morning, I'd say I'd get to about 25,000 followers in the blink of an eye, and I'd have a list of apologies as well after that. So outside of Twitter, in my personal life and my work life, I'm incredibly successful. I've fucking family, beautiful house, I have everything I ever wanted. So I don't need likes or followers on Twitter to give me some sort of, I don't know what people would get from it, because it's certainly not me. I put up a joke once there that I was getting paid for podcasts, and
you got me with that one. I
got you for beauty, didn't I?
I think you were earning from the Loaded lads. I was thinking, I'm gonna have to sign up with Loaded if they're shelling out that kind of cash.
There was another one there the other day. It was somebody commented saying, I don't mind him, he's only doing it for financial gain.
It's a bit of fun, man, isn't it? Twitter, people get too caught up in it, as we know. It's
at the end of the day, with the takeover, I got dogs abuse for months, death threats, we find out where you live, all this kind of stuff, you're leading on the fans and this, that and the other, because I was making it all up. And yet, literally to the button, everything I said happened. The game that I said if the new owners were going to be in the stand, they were in the stand. Everything that happened across the process happened. How the fuck could I make that up? I said Sven Botman was one of the top targets. I said two players, right? Last summer I said were two top targets for the takeover were Sven Botman and James Maddison, and the two players. It's
very specific info. Yeah.
If somebody's making that, people say, "Oh, you link a million players," and then you say once it comes through that, like I said, then I link the players, and then weeks afterwards I linked in the media. If you could find one player that I have linked that hasn't been linked after the fact, I'd hold my hands up.
Yeah, man.
Do you get me?
Yeah, no, I get you, man. He's a good one from Dominic. Should we go for Tony?
I love you and Tony.
Yeah, you like him. I think he's a decent player. I have a slight question mark over his attitude, and I don't know whether he'd fit in. This is just from what I've seen. There's a few social media pitfalls what he's fallen down in the past couple of years.
Maybe so, but the club are very interested in him.
Yeah.
So Eddie Howe and Ashworth, you can list them all, and they're all very keen on the player. Will they go back in from? You look at it, and if Wilson gets fit, and if there's a good dynamic between Wilson and Isaiah, then they might think, okay, Isaiah has to play in the front too. Let's go for Tony. Next summer is going to be totally different.
Yeah.
Financially and stuff like that. We talk a little bit about sponsorship and stuff.
Yeah.
So basically, you hold your hands up and say the Premier League won this time. They stifle our sponsorship. And I've said this a couple of times in other podcasts and stuff like that. And the Premier League don't really have a great model in place. And basically, what they were saying to Newcastle is that if your shirt sponsorship is worth 6.5 million, then every other sponsorship has to be less than that. Whereas they had another 2 deals lined up that would absolutely present the shirt sponsorship. They tried to wiggle out the shirt sponsorship up until about 3-4 weeks before they actually went ahead. And that's why the Castoria stuff, kind of went all a bit tits up with announcements and stuff like that, because they were still trying to wiggle out the deal. It didn't happen. So that actually held us back. So next year, the shirt sponsorship will change, and there'll be another sponsorship following on that. So there'll definitely be 2 big sponsorships next year. Part on that then as well is that they're going to look to try and pair us up with another club. So it looks like probably the first club that they're going to do is they're looking at a couple of clubs in Saudi at the moment. They have one in particular, I don't know which one, I'm not going to lie and even try to make it up. And they were trying to get this in the other way of the city group. So we'll have Newcastle twinned with a Saudi club. They were trying to get this lined up for a trip to Saudi. Yeah. But I don't know, look, I want to get at the moment, maybe it's not going to work out in time. But we will be paired with a club in Saudi. And then from that, Newcastle will actually set up academies in Saudi Arabia and other countries in MENA. So they feel like that's a very untapped market. There's going to be huge investment in football there, and Newcastle will be at the forefront in the likes of Saudi Arabia, Egypt, all this kind of stuff. They're really going to try and tap that market along with the likes of Australia and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, that brings us on to Australia. We had a question before about the new guy. I'm going to look at his name, Garang Kuol. That's what I'm going to call him. Tunisian born, I believe. Moved to Australia very young. I'd never heard of him before this morning, but he looks like a fantastic player. Very mature in his interviews. Really got his head screwed on. Looks wise beyond his years, and he can play. But he's the second player from the A-League that we've been linked with in recent months, around that age of 17, 18. I was actually at St. James's Park earlier in the summer, just after the season finished, when Funny 88 invited me down to do the match, which was an experience I'll never forget. But as I was there that day, I forget the guy's name now, but he was another one of our followers, or someone on Twitter had recognised him and said he was from the A-League, researched him, and sure enough, that was the kid that I saw. And then again today, we've been linked with a different kid from the A-League, and you're just thinking, like, there's clearly some kind of scout network in Australia now, which is probably, we're going to go global with this, but it does appear that we're focusing on maybe Brazil and Australia, 2 of the more prominent ones, what we've seen. What's your thoughts on the new kid we've been linked with? Apparently it's a done deal.
Did you not see my Photoshop tweet there about it, no?
Sorry? Well, no, I didn't.
For fuck's sake.
What was it?
No, I know. Look, it's something I've kind of known about in the background for a while. And last week, I have a tweet from last week basically saying that kind of it was between Newcastle.
Oh, sorry. No, I did. Yeah, I did see this. Yeah, and you did mention his name. Yeah.
Which was a good Photoshop, wasn't it?
Yeah, was it? Excellent.
That's why I was actually late for the podcast. I had a Photoshop course.
Yeah. You've got to get your Photoshops in order, lad.
Basically, this is something that kind of crept up over the summer. A lot of top clubs are interested, a lot of big clubs in England are interested. Representatives that are working on the deal for him also represent his brother. So his brother's playing with Stuttgart at the moment. There's a club in the Championship that were looking to sign his brother, but they found it almost impossible to organise a visa for him. So that's what I was warned about with this deal as well, because I was kind of going to go in on it a little bit, but he was told, like, what I got is that a couple of clubs in the Premier League pulled back on the deal because of trying to obtain a visa from, I think he's a Sudanese. I'm not 100% sure on his nationality, but both parents are refugees.
Tunisian,
is him.
Yeah.
So basically,
I think, or Egyptian. I can't remember. I researched it this morning. It was either Tunisian or Egyptian.
But the way his visa works out in Australia and stuff like that, anyway, it doesn't qualify him automatically for a visa in England. And a couple of clubs over the summer struggle to get that over the line, but it looks like Newcastle are going to try to push through on it and try to organise something that works. Maybe sign him and loan him to another club or something like that. So I'm a little bit cautious on it. You know, I've been told that the deal is done. I was told last week that it was kind of still down to Newcastle, Spurs and Barcelona in the background.
Yeah,
the player was very keen on the move to Barcelona. It's an easier deal, but they don't know if they're following up their interest anymore. So, look, I'm being told it's done, but with the caution of
I've heard something similar. Not my info personally. Yeah, but heard from a very big, well-known Twitter account tonight that there's certainly he's going to be at the match on at the weekend. He's been invited over. Maybe that's to as a guest or to get things in order. I don't know, but rumors that he's going to be there. Again, that's not my info. Someone passed that on to me. Very well-known Twitter account, much bigger than mine. So they said share it, so I'm going to share it. If he's there on Saturday, I'll tell you who it was. If not, I'll keep stum because I don't want to drop the minute. But yeah,
we had I could name about 20 young players that we've had at the club over the summer. And they decided kind of, I think the training ground is fucking dog shit, which doesn't kind of help. But I think that's what I'm back big time on players, young players especially at the moment. But again, I wouldn't be surprised if he was at the game. But kind of the last I heard of him was that Newcastle feel the deal is done, but issues around the visa. With the club. These things there's always workaround.
Yeah, man. Yeah, we'll see how it pans out, but it does look like we're getting that scouting network up and running. And there's going to be
Chris Reed as well, who's coming in from Sunderland. This is something that there's an account there on Twitter. He changes his name all the time, but it's Danny or Linton and a couple of other names.
Yeah. But I know you mean.
He said to me back in early June that we were signing Chris Regan, another young player, something Whelan. He was saying the club will probably drag out for a couple of months, but these are very much going to be Newcastle players, and look, it's coming through at the moment.
Yeah, it's a shame about Bobby Clark. We just didn't get the takeover done in time.
It'd be brilliant to sign him, though, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Maybe we could re-sign him.
Liverpool on the decline, so. We're going to be ships passing in the night at some stage, watching them on the way down, we're going to be up. With Liverpool, it was always going to happen that they didn't have the financial capacity to kind of keep it up, and they were incredibly lucky in the transfer window. And now they have Michael Ward, or what's his name? Ward, who's in replacing Michael Edwards. And his approach is totally different. Edwards is very hush about everything, and you have Ward now, who I spoke to somebody recently, tried to link information about certain players being bid for and interesting players, which is it's not the Liverpool tactic under Edwards, so they're kind of falling into that pitfall. Darwin Núñez looks like a glorified Andy Carroll. So if they make another mistake in the transfer window when they go to sign a central midfielder, they're in big trouble. They not replacing that midfield three. They're as good as Harvey Elliott is on the ball. He's terrible defensively. Trent Alexander-Arnold looks like he doesn't want to be there. And then when you have Trent and you have Elliott on the right hand side, and they're exposing Van Dijk.
This is it.
Van Dijk looks a mile off the pace,
Yeah. He's not with it so far this season. And also, you got Henderson, whose legs are going and have been for a while. Milner keeps dropping in there, and he looks, like age is finally catching up with James Milner. So yeah, that's going to be interesting for them.
Salah doesn't look that interesting this season either,
Yeah. It's an aging team, Sean. It's an aging team. They're going to need to make a few signings, I think, next summer to really revamp that squad. It's kind of caught up with them, I think, very quickly.
Absolutely.
Maybe one of the reasons why Mane wanted out. I'm not sure, but yeah. So yeah, we just had another comment here from Richard saying that Kuol was called up to the senior squad, which should help the work permit. So that's something that it bodes well for the deal.
That's had a huge impact on the transfer window.
It has. Yeah.
You know, I know one player that actually refused to play because he was promised visas basically, and the visas didn't come through for family members. But family members, they weren't family members. They were part of his entourage or whatever it had, like, you know, and they were unskilled, so they didn't qualify under anything. The player was saying that she promised me this, that, and the other. You know, some of the demands getting players in, you know, Portuguese, Brazilian players, and they're looking for fucking visas for their cats and dogs. Like, it's absolutely nuts. Like,
yeah. I can imagine. Yeah, it's kind of bringing the whole party along, isn't it? And you know, they can barely get their own visa, and they want, you know, 10 more for the friends and family. So here's another good question. Any ideas for stadium expansion plans that you've heard? I haven't heard anything particular, so I'm not going to kind of, you know, start guessing. I think obviously we know that we could do with another 20 or 30,000 added on. I don't know how that will be possible.
I don't want it to change though. Like, you know, I don't know. I'm still a bit of a football romantic, even though that's kind of falling away at the moment as well. Yeah. You know, but it's kind of like the thing about Newcastle, and I'm saying this as a fella from Cork, it's a 52,000 seater stadium, and it's all local fans. You know, like you have a couple of fellas that would swing in like me and stuff like that. Like, you know, like there's not many stadiums in England.
Majority.
That they sell out with people within a 50-mile radius.
Yes.
And you see it there, like, you know, it's fucking incredible. Like, you know, I never forget. I was on the Gallagher one day, you know, and I was at travelling over by myself. I don't know, it was a Nottingham Forest on, I think it was a Monday night match back in the Championship, like, and there was an old chap. I'd say he was about 80 years of age, and it took him a good 15 minutes to make it up the steps, and he got into the seat. And I was like, fucking hell, like, I was like, how did he even get in here? Like, that game started, and for 90 minutes, he was shouting and roaring and jumping around place like a teenager. What football does for people is incredible, like, you know. And, you know, like, at Anfield, you know, I went to Anfield there just pre-COVID, and it's like karaoke for foreigners. You know, it's like, let's go out to the ball game, you know, and it's like they wave all the flags, like, and then, like, you know, like I was there back maybe 7-8 years ago in the Cup, and it was incredible, like, you know, and the difference in the space of 5 years was astronomical, like, you know, it was like great for the songs that everybody knew at the start, and then after that, like, you get your odd jeer or whatever, like, you know. I'd hate for that to happen in Newcastle. Like,
you know, I
told stadiums and all this kind of stuff. Keep it what it is, you know. And you know what? I think even renovating the ground, I love the fact that, you know, when you go into Newcastle and you see the pointed brickwork and all this kind of stuff, like, you know, and there's, you know, you feel like you're still in touch with football, like, and it's not this fucking high tech nonsense there, like when you go to the Emirates and stuff like that. When you go to the Emirates, it's fancy and all this kind of stuff, like, you know, but you don't feel like you're in a real football stadium. Like, you know, Newcastle just feels like you're in a real football stadium. It's an experience there.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And, you know, I think the stadium needed a slight lick of paint, which we've had. You know, we've had our new floor and inside the concourse, some new TVs up, which are not massive, but they're slightly bigger than the Ashley versions. I like these little tweaks, and I do think we could maybe squeeze another, you know, a small expansion on one of the corners. You know, get maybe 10, 15, push it to 20 more thousand somehow. I don't know. I haven't looked at the schematics of it, but I'm not against that. But I would definitely be against moving from St. James's Park. So many special nights there that really will pale in comparison to the special nights that we have coming. So I kind of want to experience, you know, some more Champions League nights, but not just taking part. Who knows, one day in 10 years' time, we might be, you know, watching Champions League quarterfinal or something, you know, something like that. I want to experience. We've experienced the bad times at St. James's Park under Ashley, and I want to experience some good times there. You know, I was 20 years old when Ashley took over, so even, you know, I struggled to kind of recall the era before that, you know, in my teens, yes, but it's a bit blurry now. You know, I can remember the Champions League era under Sir Bobby, and it's some of the most special times what I've ever had, and I would love to just have that replicated under Howe in this stadium. Kind of, you know, we're going back like 25 years on, 20 years on, whatever, and reliving the Champions League dream would be so awesome. And I wouldn't want to do it at another stadium. I want to do it at that place behind me there.
Yeah, you know, and it's like I want it the way it is, like, you know, like this fucking, you know, so it's just like I've went to Newcastle and I went to St James's Park with fans of other teams and stuff like that, like, you know, and like it's just like, you know, and they all say it like it's so old, it's brilliant.
Yeah,
It's just like, and I hope we don't lose that. Like, you know, it's kind of like you look the way City have gone and stuff like that, and even Spurs with their new stadiums and stuff like that. Like, you know, football is evolving. Like, you know, and it's kind of we're not really. It's not really what it was. Like, you know, it's not the fans' game anymore. Like, you know, these people that sit in directors' boxes and earn millions and stuff like that. Like, we're just data points on a spreadsheet for them. Like, you know, like the fans are losing football. Like, and it's kind of, in a sense, it's making me fall out of love with it a little bit. Like, you know, but like,
it has. I've spoken to the people that think the same, Sean. I've spoken to loads of people that, you know, think the same. That they still love Newcastle United, but football as a game, as a hobby, you know, they're not too bothered about it anymore, and that's a real shame. You know, it stems from everything like what you've said. Owners, which we're going to touch on now, owners trying to change the game, change the sport in this country. You know, VAR has been ridiculous. That's took it back years. You know, I thought we needed VAR. Was a big, you know, advocate for VAR, and I've seen it, and I'm just not happy with it at all. I feel like it's playing a huge part in ruining, you know, a Saturday and a Sunday afternoon for folks who, no better example than the Crystal Palace one. That it felt like a robbery. It felt like I'd paid and everyone else had paid £30 to £50 to watch nonsense, basically. And we were a team that was trying hard. It was a tough game, and it just felt like, you know, we've been robbed. We were robbed for no reason.
One thing I will say is VAR is absolutely incredible. It is a fantastic piece of equipment. You know,
if used correctly,
If used correctly, it's very much like a Volvo is the safest car in the world, but if you get a monkey to drive, he's going to fucking crash it.
Yeah, very true.
You know, like, so people said, get rid of VAR. You know, if we had no VAR, that goal would have been disallowed anyway on the referee's view. You know, VAR is incredible, but it's implemented by idiots. You know, like, at the end of the day, they have to make they have to give the managers a bit of buy-in, right? You have, say, Eddie Howe, right? Just for example, it's not going to happen, right? But we went to West Ham, got beat. You go home to Bournemouth, get a bad result. You know, it can happen, get a player sent off. All of a sudden, then he's a manager under pressure because Crystal Palace game was a draw, which we should have won. You know, then you have a dodgy West Ham game, then you're home to Bournemouth, who are incredibly unpredictable, not a great side, but anything can happen in a game of football. The managers, you know, maybe when the decision is made, the ref goes off the thing, both managers get to see it, they give their opinion on it, and that's it. You know, like, if both managers looked at that, they would have came to a mutual agreement of, look, that's a push, like, you know, as clear as day. Like Alexander Isak, you know, that offside against Liverpool. If it's that close that you have to draw a fucking line, right? Where was the advantage? He had to beat two defenders and a goalkeeper. Surely there's a way of someone up saying, did he gain an advantage? No. How tight was it? Millimeters.
Yeah.
You know, so where's the advantage?
That one was ludicrous because we were told last season, or might have even been the season before, at the end of that one.
There has to be daylight between them.
Yeah, but we were also told that the attacker was going to get the advantage. So if they were relatively, you know, in line, we're talking, you know, differences of millimeters here, but if they were in line and it wasn't noticeable that they were, you know, gaining advantage from it, that the attacker would get the, you know, the advantage, and we've not seen that. Someone said on that incident that they were using shadows, which I find absolutely mind-boggling. That's what we're using for. It's nonsensical.
Again, look, it's a fantastic piece of equipment that is implemented flawlessly in Holland, you know, but again, you have too many referees that have their fingers in the pipe, they're supporting clubs and stuff like that, so they need to bring somebody in from the outside. At the end of the day, right, technology is so advanced now that you could sit somebody that doesn't even follow football, explain the rules to them, you know, show you there's a courses or something that they can do that doesn't have a biased opinion that can say, that's a fucking push in the back. They did not gain an advantage. I could show that to my missus and she could make those two calls and she hates football.
Yeah, that's basically where we're at, aren't we? You know, we've got people that appear to not understand the rules of the game, which they're at the height of the profession. We're not talking about someone in, League One or League Two. I mean, I know the lower leagues aren't using VAR, but it's like, you know, we're talking the highest level you could go. Someone sat in a job that doesn't know the rules of football. Something's gone very seriously wrong. Yeah. So let's touch on what Kenny's saying here. We kind of sidetracked it a bit there, but what's your views on this All-Star game from Todd Bowley? What he's been talking about yesterday and today. My opinion, just very briefly, I think it's absolute nonsense. I could talk about it a whole show on this, why it's nonsense. But you're the guest tonight, Sean. What's your thoughts on it?
Again, I suppose one of my degrees I have in manufacturing and management, and it's kind of a position I hold at the moment, right? And one thing they teach you and they tell you about is that when you're doing a communication, right, what you do is you put out something first. That sounds a bit ludicrous. Get people talking about it, and then you say, look, that was a bit of a stupid idea, but what if we do this? You know, so if he's coming out, Tabioli, if he's coming out and saying that, oh, let's do an All-Star game. Something else is happening in the background, and he is, you know, he's kind of punching through a little bit. Let's gauge a reaction. Sky Sports will run with it. All these usual, you know.
Yeah.
When it happens, you know, and the Americans are, I know Gary Neville, I'd say the penny dropped him today that he thought to himself, Jesus Christ, the only thing that's probably going to save us from being owned by Americans is Newcastle and Manchester City. You know, because you have six clubs in the Premier League now that are owned by Americans. You know, they didn't want Newcastle to take over, you know, for the simple fact of, I know Keith Patterson said it a million times, the cartel and a lot of other people above them didn't want the Saudis in. And it's not because of piracy, not because of human rights. You know, piracy played a part. It played a part in it, don't get me wrong, right? Once they cleared the piracy thing, the doors were open for us to come in. But the clubs still don't want us involved because the Americans want to take over the Premier League. And it's as simple as that. There's too much money in it. It's the biggest sport outside of America. You know, they want to own the Premier League, and that's what they're pushing towards. They have 6 clubs now already. You know, if Burnley get promoted, that's 7. You know, so they're already doing it. And now bringing in things like this. So with this All-Star game, right, something that has been floated in the background. You know, they're saying All-Star game. You know, so obviously he was given the brief of, let's go and put something out there and gauge a reaction, and Sky Sports will put up their formations and all this nonsense and they create a bit of a storm around it. So they'll say, let's do North versus South. And then people say, no, let's do Middle East or the Midlands as well. And what about this side? What about that side? What about London versus Manchester and all this kind of stuff? So what is in the background of what people have spoken about for a while is that they want to do like a Premier League All-Star 11 versus La Liga All-Star 11 versus Bundesliga All-Star 11, you know, and do multiple leagues and have a tournament, say maybe midsummer or, you know, maybe in a break or something like that, where the clubs will come together and the countries and such will come together.
Yeah.
You know, so very much he is breaking the ice on something that's been planned in the background for a long time, you know. But look, the European Super League is something that is still very much on the agenda, and he's somebody that's going to help them push it as well. But what they're looking at the moment is, you see, you know, they pushed through the World Cup in mid-season, you know, and then some nonsense came out about what would happen the World Cup every 2 years, and, you know, all these kind of things came up. You know, again, these things are just testing the water for what they're really trying to push through. You know, they're trying to see if they have the capability to fit in extra games. And an idea that's being pushed at the moment as a workaround for the European Super League is either for 3 weeks during the middle of the season or at the end of the season to see if they can have their own tournament, basically. Yeah. You know, not like a champ. Granted, it sounds like a Champions League, but there'll be way less teams. You have the European Super League teams, say, have 12 teams. Every second season they'll do it, and they'll get to drop out of domestic cups. At the end of the day, with the Premier League becoming more prominent American owners, when they get to like probably 9 clubs, 10 clubs and stuff like that, then they have a bigger voting capacity as well on the board. So all of a sudden they're going to say, okay, can we leave these clubs come out of domestic cups? Is it a good idea? They're going to be voting on what they want to push through themselves. You know, so that's what's going to start happening. They're going to get to a stage where they'll own more than 50% of the vote, and they'll start pushing through. Instead of having halves, we'll have quarters. You know, you're talking, they'll get something with the European Super League, whether it's this tournament that they're trying to float about at the moment, where they're for 3 weeks, that whether it's mid-season or whichever, and then whatever teams do it, then they don't have to play in the domestic cups, which actually gives them back the game time, so they don't have to kind of worry about fatigue, so they still have the same games during the season, and it'll only be played on the off years when the European Championships or World Cup isn't happening. So a lot of stuff going on in the background. It is going to revisit it, and I think the Premier League know that they're not going to be strong enough to actually stop it this time. They're hoping that the likes of Newcastle or Man City can stop it.
No. Like I say, I was talking to a fan today on Twitter who was a foreign fan, and I think he was a Chelsea fan, but he didn't live in this country. But he just didn't seem to have a very good grasp of our traditions. One of his examples was to incorporate this All-Star game. He simply said, "Oh, get rid of the Community Shield," which obviously used to be the Charity Shield, and the Charity Shield I actually didn't know this until I researched it this morning, but it's been up and running since 1908. Now, this is the type of the generational thing, what we're dealing with, younger fans and fans from other countries, foreign fans of the Premier League, and now at the stage where, they're suggesting things off the cuff, like, well, just scrap the Community Shield, And
but
it's like,
when this happens, and it's going to happen, like they're going to Americanize our football, our Premier League, and when that happens, I probably won't follow it anymore, because it's not what I grew up supporting. It's not what I love. When this happens, I hope people point fingers at the likes of Sky Sports and the Athletic and the Telegraph and all these ones that were saying, look at Newcastle, look at their takeover, look at their takeover, look at their takeover, look at everything that they're doing wrong. Human rights, all this nonsense that they couldn't give a fuck about. Like you see one journalist saying that Newcastle's wide away jersey is a stain on the club's tradition. It's horrible, I'd never wear it, I'd never endorse it, blah, 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 blah. Yet they're ignoring the fact that every kit that Newcastle ever had is probably made in a sweatshop by a 5-year-old young fella doing 14-hour shifts in Indonesia somewhere. So where's your moral high ground and human rights there? So again, it's human rights has become fashionable for journalists at the moment. Not every journalist, I have great respect for some journalists, don't get me wrong. But it's become the in thing and the fashionable, that they're pushing this human rights abuses with Newcastle. And don't get me wrong, Saudi Arabia's human rights abuses, and if you do your research on Yemen and stuff like that, it's absolutely disgusting, and I don't condone it. But if you close the door and change, nothing changes. We opened the door to change. We've allowed the Saudis in, and now we're going to show them our culture. When I say our culture, the fans and stuff like that. And when you see the lads there, like Newcastle Pride and all this kind of stuff, I think it kind of sends a powerful message to me when you see, your LGBTQ flags up and the rainbow colours up, and it's next to a Saudi Arabia flag maybe in the ground or something like that. You think, this is actually becoming something that works side by side.
Yeah.
And it sends a big message, and this will slowly start to open the doors in Saudi Arabia to change, because they'll see how we've integrated them into our culture and how we've integrated everybody else, whether it's colour, sexuality, or what you want to identify as, so we've opened the door to change. We're going to help them change.
Very true.
But, again, with this thing of focus on Newcastle, they're doing that while nobody's been looking at what the Americans are trying to do. New York Times, I'm not going to say the journalist's name, but he's a finger puppet for FSG, and he threw a lot of shit at Newcastle, and then he got to interview Mbappe last week, and he was practically shining the shoes. He didn't get time to ask him the question. This is the same journalist now that was at Stamford Bridge and absolutely dug into Eddie Howe while off camera was mocking the local journalist for asking football questions. So
it's not right. I know exactly who you're talking about.
Allegedly on everything.
Yeah, allegedly. Yeah. Right. We're running out of time, Sean. But before you go, I want to ask you about your affiliation with Newcastle United, and just as a fan, where did you get your from, and what happened?
So I grew up with Blackburn Rovers then, believe it or not. So my three brothers, my dad, they were 2 Arsenal, 2 Liverpool. So I remember when I was younger, I played a tournament in the back of our school, where I live and stuff like that. I banged in a couple of goals, and my brothers were messing. They were calling me Shawnee Shearer, because Shearer was at Blackburn at the time. That summer was, I think, the summer after he made his debut against Arsenal, and he got his hat-trick. And they were slagging me. So I just got obsessed with Alan Shearer. They followed Blackburn. Then when he left Blackburn, it was just automatic to follow him. I was an Alan Shearer fan. I fell in love with Newcastle, and then just kind of came in the background. Probably like most Newcastle fans. So then I just got the bug for it, going over there and stuff like that. There's a beauty you know, it's something that Anfield has lost and something that Newcastle has. Like, you know, you're in the ground and you have fellas on a Friday night game or a Saturday early morning game, and they're running in their work gear, like, you know, like your tradies running in, like, you know, in their painting gear and stuff like that, and they're trying to find a seat in the stadium, and it's like everything rushes around the club, like, and the club is like, you go there and it's just like this, it's just like the chapel on the hill, like, it's like everything's built around it, like, you know, you can't help but fall in love with the club, like, you know. I never forget, I was over at a game, I can't remember who we were playing, it was pissing rain. My memory's left me now. I can't remember who we were playing, but we were 2-0 down at the time, like, and there was an old chap sitting next to me. I turned around and I said to him, I was like, I don't know if I can do this anymore, like, you know, because at the time I was travelling from Cork to Newcastle, which is from Cork to
Sorry, don't know what
so you're going Cork to Newcastle, which is you're going Cork to Dublin, which is 3 hours.
Yeah.
Then you're getting your flight over, then you're getting a late flight back, and then you're traveling on again 3 hours, and 9 times out of 10 we were losing. So I was like, I told him, I was like, I don't know how long more I can do this, if I can't stick it any longer or whatever like that. He turned out and he was I'm 80 years of age. He said, everything that I've loved in my life has left me except for my football club. No matter whatever happens to you in life, you'll always have your football club. Don't ever give up hope. And you know what? It's something that always stuck with me, like, you know, no matter how bad or how things got with the club and with Ashley and the boycotts and all this kind of stuff, I was like, no matter what, that's always going to be my football club. Like.
Yeah, man. Well, it was like the Keegan quote, wasn't it? When you know, not long after he'd been dismissed or, you know, constructively dismissed, whatever. You know, of the, you know, like I can't remember the exact quote, but it was like, just keep supporting your club. One day you'll have it back, and Ashley will be gone. And it was hard to believe at the time, and obviously it didn't happen for a lot of years after that. But eventually, you know, that quote came true, and obviously the contrast of the previous owners to the new owners made it even more special. You know, and this is something I said the other day, was like, we would have just happily had a takeover, just Ashley out. That's all we wanted, Ashley out.
All I ever wanted was an owner that would recycle the money that we put in.
Yeah, spending the club's money, which is what Ashley refused.
You know, I wasn't pushed on Saudi ownership and that. I would love if somebody from Newcastle owned Newcastle and put the fans' money into the club. And if we were a mid-table team that brought through players and had to sell them and build from there or wherever that, it wouldn't bother me in the slightest. You know, it's just that there's that feeling of when you follow a club, you know, and I have relatives that are Dortmund fans and stuff like that, like, you know, and it's kind of, their feeling is that you follow a club that gives back to you. You know, you support a club that supports you in a sense, like, you know, that the money you put in comes back out. You know, whereas with Ashley, like, it went into his pocket, you know, with the sports director, or went somewhere else, like, I went into Dennis Wise's fucking Marble or something like that, like, you know. Whereas with the Saudis, there's a lot of stuff about the Saudi takeover that I'm not comfortable with, you know, but as it, you know, and it's, to ignore it, you're an idiot, you know, but there's a lot of stuff about the Saudi takeover I don't like, but what I do like about it is that we will have a huge impact on opening that country's eyes to what the modern world is, you know, and we do that.
Hopefully we can have a positive impact in that sense.
Absolutely. Like, you know, I listen to Mitch and the lads there on NUFC Matters a lot, like, you know, and especially when they talk about the impact that the Man City takeover has had in, you know, that part of the world, and how much has changed over there, even in the last 10 years. Like they said, even Ramadan, for example, like it's absolutely unrecognizable for what it was. Like, you know, so again, if we can have that change, and in 10 years' time, if we look back at this takeover and, you know, we see people, you know, going to holiday resorts in Saudi Arabia and being able to drink and all this kind of stuff, like, you know, like, again, if I'm paraphrasing kind of what the lads say on Matters and stuff like that, like, you know, that's a huge change on the culture, like.
No, I totally agree, and it's something that I really hope does happen. I personally like to hear a bit more from PIF. I feel like with them being the 80% shareholders, obviously, you know,
it's not what they do, though.
No, you're probably right, but I just feel you maybe could have spoken about, you know, the ambition from their side. You know, we've heard from Amanda, we've heard from Mehrdad, we've heard from Jamie. But these guys are the 80% shareholders, and I just think it would be nice to hear a little bit more. No, not more, just a little bit more.
I understand that, but again, where our investment, the investment that PIF have in us is a grain of sand on a beach compared to what they have in other places.
Yeah.
So what they invest in golf and what they invest in everything else, they don't go around bragging about it. They don't go around telling people this is what we're going to do, that's what we're going to do. And I know that's what fans want to hear, but we're a very small investment for them. They're not going to go out and say, say this is our plans that we're going to do this in the Champions League. Like, I have the same the club for me. I ask the same questions, right? Why aren't we hearing from them? And they said what they will always say is actions speak louder than words. They're not people of many words. When have you ever seen anybody involved with PIF out shouting off their mouth about what they're going to do?
Yeah,
absolutely never.
Yeah.
And it's not going to change.
Yeah. Well, Sean, we've run out of time. It's been absolutely amazing.
I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was a good one tonight. I hope all the listeners and subscribers like this one too. Seemed like from the numbers we had a good constant view in there, so I think people stayed with us on that journey. It was excellent, really brilliant to have you on. Definitely have you. Sorry,
and don't forget to check out the Geordie Rise as well.
Geordie Rise from our good friend Dean. I've got his t-shirt as well. Not wearing it tonight. Sean, you've got it on, repping it. Great brand, and he's trying to create, a local business that supports mental health. So, there's nothing not to like about it. Great designs of the t-shirt with a nice ethos behind it too. So yeah, check out the Geordie Rise and get yourself a t-shirt. Nice little plug there for Dean.
He personalizes as well on the inside of my one. There was an I love you on it. It was a bit strange, but look.
I've asked him to personalize one for me, and I think he's working on it. So we'll see. But great lad in a great brand. Well, Sean, thank you very much.
Cheers, man. Thanks a lot, man.
We'll definitely have you again. If you stay on the line, and I'll have a little crack with you after we've said bye to the followers. So yeah, thanks a lot, guys, for tuning in. We'll be back on Saturday post-match with a full Tyne whistle. Let's hope we've got a victory to talk about with no VAR controversy. But don't hold your breath on that one. And we'll see what guests we've got on next week. Still working on a couple of big names, but it's been a great week for guests this week. We've had 3 top lads on with Steve, Al-Walid, and now Sean Casey. All NUFC Twitter legends in their own right. So thanks very much, guys. Please like and subscribe. And let's help the channel grow. We're trying to create a community where everyone can be a part of, getting some names on that, people can associate with on Twitter. And we're trying to build something, but we need your help to do it. So please like and subscribe if you like the show. That's been Sean Casey. I'm Ben from Mouth of the Tyne. Thank you very much, guys. See you soon.